So now it is my great honor to introduce a dear friend, Karlene Petitt, who is a retired Delta captain pilot, and she'll talk to us some more about what her experiences have been and her remarkable story.
Thank you, Jackie. And yes, I'm Karlene Petitt. I'm from Seattle, Washington. I hate the word whistleblower. I never blew the whistle on anyone. I'm a safety advocate. How many in here are also advocates for whatever you reported? Raise your hands. How many of you suffered emotional or physical ramifications after reporting? And how many of you, when you stepped forward, your friends and coworkers took a step back? And how many of you were really naive, like myself, who thought that when we thought coming forward, they were going to take care of it? Okay, you know what? We all have different reasons for being here, but we're all here for the same reason. And I want to thank you all for having the courage to stand up and do what you did, and perseverance to survive and to be here today, because you will be changing the lives of other people. I became a pilot simply because at 9 years old, I was playing a game called Careers with my girlfriends, and we were sitting on my bedroom floor. And you could be a librarian, a school teacher, a nurse, a model, or a hostess. And for all you young people, a hostess is a flight attendant. Okay, and so I couldn't get on that hostess spot. So I said, fine, I don't care. I'm not going to be a hostess. I'm going to be the pilot. And one of my girlfriends said, you can't be a pilot. I said, why not? She goes, because my dad's a pilot, and he said girls can't do that. By the way, a side note, he retired as a Delta captain. Okay, so just they still think that today. But I said, yes, we can. No, you can. I said, fine, game over, everyone out. And I went up and asked my mom, and I said, Mom, can I be a pilot? She said, I don't care what you do. Get out of the kitchen and cooking dinner. Okay. So I decided I was going to do that. Now, a little backstory. I came from a very dysfunctional family. I'll call pouring on the head or in the orange juice of the 9 or 13-year-old. Okay, there was abuse. There's all this stuff going on. But when you're a kid going through that, you don't identify those words. This is a dysfunctional life. But later, in reflection, I thought, you know what? God gave me something. It gave me the fight that I didn't like it. I wanted justice. There was injustice going on back then. And it wasn't right. And it gave me the strength. It also gave me the indication that I wanted to get the heck out of there and go fly airplanes. I'd like to fly away somewhere. Interesting thing about dysfunctional families, I think it was Jack Canfield said that 85% of us come from them. Get over it. We're not unique, okay? And so I decided I was going to be a pilot. Sisters, everyone teased me, you're not going to do it. And it kind of became my thing. And just my stubbornness, I would probably be too humiliated to not even try, because I said I was going to do it. I started working. I mowed lawns, babysat, weeded yards. I mean, I'm starting at 9 years old, working under money, paper clothes for school, and for safety flying lessons. And one of my sisters even called me a miser. He didn't understand why I was 41. And so when I was 16, I went out to the airport. And I think it was like $15 at the time. And I paid my money, and the instructor took me out. We walked around the airplane, showed me the tires, and we looked at the wings. And then we got in, and he taxied out to the runway, and the tower gave us clearance for departure. And he said, okay, you've got it. I don't have it. I don't know how to fly. And he says, I'm going to teach you. So at 16 years old, put my feet on the rudders. And then I'm controlling the direction down the runway. I'm pushing into power, and I rotate. And I'm thinking, holy cow, I'm in control of my life. And I am not only in control of my life, I'm leaving all those problems way down on the ground. And then I thought, and they're going to pay me to do this? I was, okay. My goal was to have a family so I could do better. And I got married, I had 3 kids, and I was going to not only be a pilot, but I was going to be a Alaska Airlines pilot, because I live in Seattle, and I'm 10 minutes from that airport. And I could take my kids to school, go fly my airplane, and pick them up. I could do it all. One of my sisters, out of jealousy, had other plans and blocked that path. And it put me down a different path, not by my choice, but because of what had transpired. And that next path ended up at 8 different airlines, furloughs, mergers, bankruptcies. Man, I went through all of it. But through that path, I learned that I have the aptitude for teaching. I wrote training programs. I trained in the simulator. I flew jets. I flew the 727, 37. I went and put the 757 into service down in Guyana. I flew the Hajj on the 747 in a world where they told me, don't talk on the radio. Don't talk on the radio because you're a woman. What happened when I talked on the radio, they gave us priority clearance because they wanted me out of their airspace. And one day, pilot in the terminal came up and he said, you're the woman. And this was a Saudi pilot. Said, you're the woman we're hearing on the radio. I guess so, because I was the only one here. And he shook my hand and said, good to see you. So times were changing a little bit, but not completely. So after all these airlines, I ended up at Northwest. And because of my experience of everything I had done as a new hire on probation, they put me in the training department. Training department there, you got to both fly and be in the training department. And they put me on the 747 because I had flown the aircraft. And so I'm on the 747. I'm writing training programs for them. I'm teaching, I'm checking. Everything's great. I had the flexibility because of that schedule to manage the kids. One of my daughters ended up in surgery, paralyzed. I had the flexibility to go spend the month in the hospital with her until I was able to get her home. It was a great job. And then, and while I was doing this, I went back to school and got my master's in human services because I wanted to understand the psychology of these really old pilots I was teaching. Who's that young girl teaching us, And so I wanted, that was going to help me do that. And then I got an MBA because all the airlines were filing bankruptcy. And I thought, okay, I should probably learn about this industry that I've committed my life to. And so then we merged with Delta. And I was so excited because they were the lead airline. And these pilots, everyone at one time, way back in the day, wanted to be a Delta pilot. And these double-breasted black suits and their hats and all the marketing was just elite is the word. And when I got there on day one, they told the new hires, never call in fatigue. Fatigue is the other F word. It's better to call in drunk. They falsified training records. They didn't give the required orals. They just put in grades and passed them on. They gave the test materials, answers to the tests, to go in and take electronic tests so they could pass. Now, I had been in training my whole life at this point. I inspected America West, at Guyana, at Northwest, and I'm thinking, how can you do this? This is passenger safety. We need to understand what we're doing. And so what do? I go back to school to get my PhD in aviation safety. So I go down to Embry-Riddle and I'm working on this and I learned this new concept that I had never heard of, but it was federal law, safety management systems, SMS. And safety management systems required a positive culture. And a positive culture required a reporting culture. I mean, it's mandated by federal law that we have a reporting culture. The ground employees are the ones that see this. And the day I got to Delta, when I'd see something wrong, I'd say something, because we're supposed to see something, say something, right? And I would see something, say something, and I'd get a line check. And I'd see something, say something, I'd show up in the simulator, and somebody would have moved all the switches and buttons. I would see something, say something, and then I was told, you're never allowed to talk to your chief pilot again. You got to go directly and report to the regional director. Now, the regional director, he's a busy guy, so he tells me, Karlene, you just need to tell me everything you're doing on your days off. So now my days off, I have to report on what I'm doing. And so one of the days off, I went to a safety conference because Richard Anderson, who had been the CEO at Northwest, and he'd come into our instructor, he'd come to instructor meetings and he'd say, my door's open. Anything I need, you guys come talk to me. And I did often when I was working on MBA. I reached out to Richard Anderson and asked specific questions. And so I went to this conference because he was the keynote speaker. And he said, everyone at my airline has the unfettered responsibility to report anything they see unsafe. Every employee at my airline can shut down the airline. Okay, he's at Delta now. And I thought about this and I reported to my regional director and said, oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you at the safety conference, heard Richard Anderson speak. He's going in my research paper. Well, what did he say? And I told him. And as I'm writing what I told him, I thought, this is ridiculous. Maybe this is the leadership and this is the dysfunction. And maybe these people in the glass tower didn't know what was going on. That was my naive moment. They not only knew what was going on, but they are playing Russian roulette with passengers' lives because they're intentionally doing it to save money. And I wrote a 54-page safety report and gave it to them. Now, since I don't have a whole lot of time, I can't tell you all the sordid details of what transpired. But when I went in there, it was very aggressive towards me until I gave them the reports and their eyes opened wide. And they never thought I would give them a report because my union had me speak to the union attorneys the night before who convinced me, don't ever put anything in writing. Don't do it. And I thought, well, that doesn't make sense because there's references in here. There's stuff they want to read. They might want to review it, I'm back in my naive state. And they told me not to do it. I did it anyway, thank goodness. Because sometimes these things turn into a he said, she said, right? And they will always say something different than really happened. And so I gave them a report that under the Air 21 law, actually, they could not deny what I had provided them was actual safety, federal regulations, violations of what they were doing. And so, but that's crew scheduling, call them later. Anyway, so only the pilots would understand that one. Anyway, so what I did is when I gave them the report, all of a sudden they turned around. Oh, we should make you an instructor. We should make you an ambassador. And I'm thinking, I've gone through 6 years of hell so far, and you guys were attacking me when I came in. This is all my thought, my little bubble head. And I'm thinking, and now you want to do this because this report? I thought, oh, he really didn't understand. What they did is they said, we'd like you to be an HR safety investigator. And we'd like to give you a safety presentation to our divisional leaders. They're taking it serious. I was so happy that everyone else who warned me I had a target on my back, don't give it to them, they're going to get you. We're all wrong. I was wrong. The HR safety investigator that I met with was not an HR safety investigator. She was the manager of the employee past travel department / equal opportunity. And we met 3 hours in a hotel lobby, not at the airport, not in the conference room she told me she secured, but in the hotel lobby. I never knew why they pulled me. I was pulled 5 days later. I didn't know for another 9 months. And the reason they didn't tell me is because there's cameras and there were staff working there that could have validated what she said. But apparently I cried for 3 hours. At this meeting, I was emotionally upset. I'm paranoid that people are out to get me. No, I know who they were. Paranoid. They were not unknown. That's the funny part. But what happened is they put me into Section 15, and they revoked, or they didn't take away my medical, but they said I couldn't fly because I had a mental health issue. They bought a doctor, and I say they bought it. They paid $74,000. All the things I'm going to tell you, we learned in discovery. I didn't know at the time. And I went back to Dr. Altman back in Chicago, 3 different occasions over 3 months period of time. He asked questions like, did you express your milk for your husband to feed the babies? Now, this was 30 years earlier. Here's a really good question for you West Coast people. What are your political and religious views on suicide? This was not a real evaluation. I assumed when they sent me there that Delta was retaliating. I never knew that doctors could be bought. In the airline industry, this is rampant. Sadly, something that needs to get fixed. So, on this Christmas Eve, December 24, 2016, I became bipolar. He FedExed me an envelope on Christmas Eve and emailed me to make sure that I got it. My career was over, because you don't fly when you're bipolar. You're done. Discovery, we found out that they knew it back in October because our regional director was editing my medical report. And so they waited until that strategic moment to let me know. So through the contract process, I get to go get my own doctor. And I hired a forensic psychiatrist out here on the East Coast. And we talked for 2 hours. He said, you are not bipolar, but we have to meet. It's going to cost you $5,000. And I said, okay. So we scheduled a time. I bought an airline ticket, booked my hotel, and a week before, call me. Always worry about the emails that say, call me, okay? Because they don't have anything in writing. And what had happened is he said there's a conflict of interest. He was really sorry he couldn't help me. But he did stay on the phone and tell me medically all the different things that Dr. Altman had written in his report were wrong and why they were wrong. So I appreciated that. But what we found out is Delta bought him. My union told Delta I was hiring this forensic psychiatrist who was very well respected, and they put him on a retainer for 2 years. So he couldn't help me. They told him, you can't take her case or you don't work for us. No, but she's fine. Nope, but you can't take her case. So I ended up going to the Mayo Clinic, 4 doctors, and over 3 days, and then they sent me with a panel of 10. Everyone got together because so they eliminate bias if like you have a personality conflict. And when I went back to the Mayo Clinic, one of the doctors had told me, when I went in there, he's looking at me, he says, what are you doing to have this composure? He said, for what you've gone through, most people would be an absolute wreck. And I told him, well, I don't know. I just had my 8th grandchild, and but I'm writing books. What I did is I wrote novels. We have social media violations. I wrote novels and changed characters' names and added a little murder and sex in there to fictionalize it, but everything else is true. Okay, so I'm writing these novels, and I told him this, and he says, "Are you in these novels? Are you a character in this novel?" I said, "Yeah, probably 4 of them." You know, my girlfriend says, "You told the psychiatrist you had 4 personalities? That's not to be a good thing." But he understood because I told him. I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just wrote a chapter where my pilot Darby is going to the Mayo Clinic to get her evaluation, and she's telling her good friend Linda, who's a counselor, over a glass of wine, what happens if they get me? What happens if I lose my medical? What happens if I don't survive this?" And I wrote in my book, because as I write, and I was doing this, I wasn't plotting out what my characters, I just let them talk to each other. And that counselor wrote to myself, they very well might get away with this, but your life is not going to be over. It's just going to be different. And I explained this to the doctor, and he leans back in his chair with a big grin. He goes, "Keep waiting." And so Mayo Clinic cleared me. Then we had to go to neutral, and that lasted 7 months longer than it should have, because Dr. Altman and the Mayo Clinic had to decide on the doctor. And everyone pretty much in the industry knows who the bought-off doctors are, and he's trying to offer 3 bought-off doctors, and Mayo Clinic's going, "No, let's send her University of Texas. Let's send her big hospital. You said she's bipolar? Let's let one of those specialists, not the podiatrists, do it." Okay? They argued, so much so that the Mayo Clinic bowed out. They didn't sign up to do this. And then Dr. Steingraus, bless his heart, 6.5 months in, was feeling bad. He knew I was out in the wind, never to get my job back because we're just hanging there. And he found a doctor coming out of the military who was going to do this. And he called Dr. Altman and said, "Will you agree on this private practice doctor?" And he did, because they were friends. So I went back to this doctor, absolute delightful man. He says, "You're not bipolar." He said, let me write to Delta and see what kind of report. Do they just want a statement or they want a report?" So he wrote to Delta, and Delta said, "No, you have to go back and do it again. No expense spared this time. We'll even fly people out to see you." And he took another month. He doubled his rate. and got it up to $4,900. And I'm telling you these prices, I think Mayo Clinic was $3,300. To let you know, $74,000 is not normal. They put me through a neuropsychological testing in one day that's supposed to be a battery test for 2 days, and day 3 is when you meet the psychiatrist. I did all the tests in one day and then met the psychiatrist same day. Dr. Altman said in his letter, in part because I failed these tests, but they wouldn't let me see him. But when I went to the Mayo Clinic anticipating to do them again, and guess what? This time I knew what we were doing, so I practiced. I even told the doctor that, and he kind of laughed. He says, well, we're not going to redo these tests. We're going to learn nothing new. You were exceptional in most areas, and those you weren't were just fine. And yet this doctor said this. So I battled through, and I ended up getting my job back on my own because I followed my contract, and they had to bring me back. And it took me 2 years, but I never lost my medical. Almost got it deferred after the Mayo Clinic, or after the bipolar diagnosis, because when the Mayo Clinic told my aviation medical examiner she's fine, he got nervous. And he got nervous for one reason only, because a friend of his in the FAA wrote to him and referred to Delta as the baddies. Don't support this airman any more than you have. This is a time bomb between Mayo Clinic and Altman. And I told him, I go, Dr. Larry, if you defer my medical, I may never get it back. And so he reached out to the regional flight surgeon who issued it. Sight unseen, just read the reports, didn't even meet me. So now we have this third evaluation. Delta finds out I get my medical, and they're pissed. So they called Michael Berry, the deputy federal flight surgeon. What in the heck are you giving her a medical for? She's bipolar. Now, they're not supposed to do that, and the contract says you can't notify until the whole thing's done, but they did it anyway. And so Michael Berry calls Dr. Wyrick. What did you do that for? And he said, because it's the right thing to do. Now, all these conversations I know to be true because I heard them, was told firsthand by Dr. Wyrick what happened with this. So they told him, Berry told him, we'll go back and read Dr. Altman's 366-page report, all the supporting documents. I think there were like 2,000 of them. That were missing all the letters that I got from the dean of Embry-Riddle, for professors, from lifelong friends, everyone who knew me wrote letters to support me, and we provided them to Dr. Altman. He didn't ask for them, I just gave them to him, but none of that ended up in the medical report. And so the medical appeals board cleared me. Delta wouldn't let me return. So now I've got the Mayo Clinic, the medical appeals board. I got the third diagnosis. They still wouldn't let me back. 2 years, I finally go back to training. When my daughter had been paralyzed, is now back surgery. So I'm literally studying at home at her bedside, sleeping in one of the grandkids' twin bed at night with a flashlight, studying my 777. This is how airline pilots train, And so they said, when you get back, you will go right into training. So I was prepared. And then they delayed me another 2 months, and they put a hit on me in training. Found out from the instructor that he was told to damn me, but he didn't. So in the meantime, I'm going through trial, and trial is probably the worst part of this, because and one thing that it saved me, and I would highly recommend, is be involved in your own life, because I was involved in my trial, and while it took time, my new attorney, I should say, the first one floundered $500 an hour, and I floundered for a year. And then a law firm came in and said, hey, we want to take this on contingency, but you got to drop all that safety stuff. They're doing this to your girl. And that law firm found out about me because some pilot had a different legal matter and told them. So now I'm going, I don't want to drop. I know they did this because I'm a girl reporting safety. That's a given. But I don't want to turn this into a gender thing. This is about safety. But when we got to court, they turned it into a gender thing. Apparently, that woman who was a safety investigator was supposedly investigating my EO complaints. And during trial, the judge says, well, if you were going to make an equal opportunity complaint, a gender complaint, what would you do? I said, make a gender complaint. He said, you wouldn't embed it in the safety report? Probably not. I mean, it was interesting because I had the opportunity to go that path, and that was their defense. And so none of this made sense. And so out of the blue, I got a phone call. I'm into this a year legal battle, thousands of dollars. I'm not working. And I got a call out of the blue from a law professor I'd worked with at Embry-Riddle. He was a pilot. He's a attorney. And he was Embry-Riddle's aviation law professor. And I ended up in that class, even though I was worried, don't take that one. It's too hard. You don't need that elective. Did it anyway. Thankfully, and he called and he says, you know, Karlene, have you talked to Lisa? And that changed my life. Dropped that attorney. He never turned out, he never knew the law. We only get reasonable attorney fees. He charged me $3,500 to tell me if I told a pilot can't fly. I could have told him free. And he said, don't worry, get all your attorney fees back. No, typically you get 90%. And what Delta had done is engaged a war of attrition on me because typically this law only provides compensatory damages. And that's typically $50,000. And if you're only getting 90% of your attorney fees, the math doesn't work. You win, but you lose. Okay. And so this is what they were doing. So I beat them. We had a 9-day trial. And over a 3-month period of time, the ruling was going to be out in a year. Delta got involved. They created a collateral estoppel claim for Delta, meaning they said they already won 3 years earlier when I dropped my grievance. And I'm thinking, I don't even know how that works, but sure as heck, and another $40,000 fighting this. And my ruling didn't come out. And now COVID's hit. And I'm sitting in a hotel in China, locked in. And then we canceled. Why did we get canceled? I logged into my computer, opened up, and had a message from the judge. I won. I think I yelled, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And we're locked in, and my captain the next night, he says, when we're actually departing, he says, big smile on his face, he says, I think congratulations are in order, because he heard me yell through this room. But I won. And I won an unprecedented amount. He not only awarded me $500,000, but he ordered, 10 times the normal amount, but he ordered Delta to put his ruling on the walls. And in this ruling, he said that I was an unwitting player in this Captain Graham and Chris Puckett game of chess as attorney and the VP, who turned out to be the senior VP because one of the men I met with, he became our FAA administrator. Now, if any of you have seen this, it was in CNN. My attorney called me one day and said, Karlene, turn on the TV. And I'm just driving in, I run in, and he goes, get the CNN, and switch over, and there's my picture. Delta, bipolar pilot. I'm thinking, this is going worldwide. How do I feel about that? Because I had no control over it. Now it's being all over, but only because of Captain Sullenberger's courage did it hit the media, because that man should never have been the FAA administrator. He was the one breaking the federal regulations for profit. And he was the one that condoned this retaliation. And yet everybody knew when they put him in there. And the only reason he made it is because they said, well, he wasn't named in the lawsuit, because we can't name people in the lawsuit. There's no accountability. We're trying to change that. And so Delta lost their appeal. He resigned within 2 days of loss of the appeal. I don't think the FAA could take that hit. Captain Graham, however, is over at the CEO of Endeavor. Ed Bastian was highly involved in this. He knew what was going on. We were even able to close it, and nothing happened to him. And so I'm thinking, I'm back flying. I'm being removed from trips. I'm being called to go sit in LA in the middle of the night for an airplane that's not even there on reserve, but I can't fly anything because my airplane's not in that town, And so this kind of stuff had been going on. The worst part of all this, and I was retaining my health and I was sustaining it, and I was doing, I was involved, and I'm writing books, and I'm working on my PhD, and I'm playing with my grandkids, and I'm trying to smile every time they try to get me, and I just say, okay, if it's legal, I'll do it. I have to do it. I have to go sit in that middle that night. And I did it. And then the administrative review board said, when Delta appealed, Delta, you lose. but Judge Morris, why did you pay her so much? And I thought, that board has no clue what I went through. Judge Morris paid so much because he knew how many high-level players, he knew what was at stake. He was an aviation prosecuting attorney. He's a private pilot. He knew what happened, and he knew he knows what's going on. And the worst part of this, and then my health started sinking. And we were going back to court for damages. And I thought, okay, we dug in. And 6 months later, Delta stepped forward and said, we'll pay you what the judge ordered and all your attorney fees because settled. And I said, okay. Okay, well, that feels like a win. I felt like I gave up. I felt like it was a loss. My health tanked. My attorney said, Karlene, no, you beat him on every motion. You beat him in court. You beat him on appeal, and they caved. But I didn't feel that way. And I think I didn't feel that way because nothing changed in my industry. All the players were there. Nothing changed. It really appalled me that everybody knew what Steve Dixon did, and yet he could be the head of the FAA. How is that even possible? And my adrenals drained. I was an absorbing protein. Food was going right through me. Everything. I'm just a mess. Both my knees popped out because I didn't have muscle to hold them anymore. And I thought, man, I got to do something. 5 minutes. I got 5 minutes. So, 5 minutes. So anyway, so I thought I have to do something. And my sister, who's a nurse, she has to read this book called The Rabbit Effect. What was it? The Rabbit Effect, the science-breaking information on how happiness improves your health. And so we're kind of joking about this. And oh, you've got to read it. I'll read it too. Oh my gosh. Turn the switch. And I realized that my brain was doing this to me. Delta didn't do this to me. It was what I perceived, what I was thinking about, and how I was addressing it. And so that book led me to another reference, and that I retired early, 4.5 years early. I walked away. I didn't want to be part of that. I mean, through this whole process, my husband's gone through numerous heart procedures because of the stress, the whole thing. And I walked away and I went down to the Mayo. I had an appointment and got down to the Mayo Clinic because there was so much going on in my body that I wanted to see, did I really have anything physically wrong with me, or was it just my brain? And I went down there and this doctor told me, integrated medicine, all my tests came back great. And at this point, I'm down there, I'm feeling good because I'm already away from the company for 3 months and I'm doing awesome. And he said to me, he says, you know, Karlene, and I want to share this with you because for all of you who are trying to create change and do something, he said, you're really passionate about this, about safety. And I have been since I retired. 3-4 times a week, people are calling me for help. And I became an aviation safety consultant and an expert, and I'm going and testifying, and I'm doing the research. And so I'm helping others with this. But what he said to me was, he said, you know, you're really passionate about this. And every movement out there, the people who started don't see the change in their lifetime. And some would think that would be depressing, but it was exhilarating for me because I realized I don't have to do it all. None of us have to do it all. But we're like that little pebble that we throw in the water that creates those waves. And sometimes we make a big splash and it happens quicker, and sometimes it doesn't. But that I realize that I don't have to do it all, and nobody else does. And so for all of you who've stood out and taken a stand, you have to realize that you've made a difference. And for a very long time, I kept thinking, I haven't made a difference. What happened? They're still doing exactly the same thing down there. It's not only Delta, it's other airlines. This is rampant in the industry, why we need this law changed. It's so important because we're all watching in the news, pilots going off the runway, doors blown off. I mean, it's all about whistleblowers. I mean, everyone's afraid to say anything, and we need to. And last week, somebody called me and he said, you know what, Karlene, I want to tell you something. I'm just calling you. I don't want anything. He says, I just want to tell you what a difference in my life you've made. And I said, how? And he says, he's a Delta pilot, and he's taken a stand for the action they've done against him. He says, because if it weren't for you and your story, and he said, I never would have the courage to come forward. And he says, and I'm willing to give up my career to do the right thing as well. And he says, I want to thank you. I'm thinking, oh, so just the mere fact that you did it, you may not know it, and they may not call you, but it's out there. You have made a difference. And so I think my time is up. Anyway, I'm still standing. I was going to play that song, I'm Still Standing, and we're going to have a little dance party, but I don't think Jackie will let us because we don't have time. So anyway, you guys, thank you very much. And I really thank you for your courage in doing what you've done. Thanks.
All right, thank you.